What's going on, guys? It's Nick here, back with another video. Must start and avoid running backs for week 16. As I've mentioned these past few weeks, the rankings and the models are free for the rest of the season. So if you have a question that I don't answer in this video, just look at the rankings. I usually update them on Thursdays, and then I do smaller edits as we get more news later in the week. This week, the schedule is a little bit different. There's not going to be a Thursday night game. There are 3 games on Saturday. So we'll start things off with the 1 o'clock Saturday game in Texans at Bucs. This game opened at 53 points, and that's been bet down to 51.5 points, which is still really high, and I believe the highest on the week. The Texans are up to 3-point road favorites as well. For the Texans, Hyde is the definition of a yardage and touchdown back. He has 3 receptions over the last 8 weeks, and they've only gone for 10 total yards. So even though we saw last week he went over 100 yards and a score, he's still a lower end flex option this week against the Bucs, who we all know have an elite run defense. I warned last week about not looking too much into the increased usage that Duke Johnson had been receiving because it was more game script related. And then we saw last week he goes out and he gets 4 total touches. So he's definitely not a guy I'd be looking to start, especially in the championship. For the Bucs, this is a backfield that I'd personally continue to just avoid. No one is getting even close to half of the snaps, and you'd likely just be starting a guy praying he scores a touchdown, and that's never something you should do, so just stay away. Bills at Patriots is the next game. This one has an extremely low total of 38.5 points, and the Patriots are currently 6-point home favorites. For the Patriots, it's basically the same as it's been over the second half of the season. The Patriots might be projected to win this game, but it's not by that many, and you still need Sony Michel to go over 100 yards and to score a touchdown, or to be under 100 yards and have multiple scores to be worth starting, because he's just not involved in the receiving game. And we've seen Rex Burkhead get involved, James White get involved, so he's just not an option, honestly, for me this week. Rex Burkhead, I just mentioned, I know he had the touchdown last week, still not getting nearly enough volume to be viable outside of like 18-team leagues, not even really even in 16-team leagues. But the guy I'm looking at is James White, because we know in this game the Patriots are going to struggle passing the ball to the receivers, and we know they don't really target the tight ends in the receiving game. So we should expect them to feature James White in the passing game, and whenever James White's on the field, we know Sony Michel isn't. So if you got Sony Michel, I'd really try and get a different option. Definitely not starting Rex Burkhead, and I think James White can be considered a running back 2. Definitely can't get up to running back 1 status because the total's really low, and he's not going to get many carries, but I do think you can trust him as a running back 2. For the Bills, Singletary has been dominating the snaps and the touches over Gore, and we saw last week that the Patriots are far better at defending the pass than the run. I wouldn't get too excited. The Bills are still only projected to score about 18 points, but with how involved he is, you can start him as a low-end running back 2 in basically any format. The final Saturday game is the Saturday night game with Rams at 49ers. This game has a 45.5 point total, and the 49ers are 6.5 point home favorites. For the Rams, Gurley may have had 2 touchdowns last week, but he also had just 18 yards on 14 touches. He's getting spikes in workload down the stretch, but he's been highly inefficient, and the projected game script doesn't really favor him. It favors a more pass-heavy game script, and he just kind of goes away when that happens. So I think you still should probably be starting him as a running back 2, because when they get close, they are going to feature him. So he does have touchdown upside, and the total's not that low, so the Rams should score some points in this one, but you need to understand that he's got a very, very low floor. For the 49ers, Mostert has taken over lead back duties. That doesn't mean he's the workhorse or anything, but it does mean he's getting the most snaps and touches of any back. He's got 5 touchdowns in his last 4 games, and he's honestly looked great since taking over. Because the total isn't super high, and because they do still give touches to Coleman and Breida, I would still rank Mostert as more of a low-end 2 to a flex play, but there's definitely a chance that the Rams just get stomped in this one, and that could lead to a big game from Mostert. As for the other 2, I personally do not believe that you can start them outside of 16-team leagues because you'd basically be hoping for a busted long touchdown, and like I always say, I do not want to start players relying on a touchdown when the chance is relatively low. Giants at Washington is next, and this game has a 42-point total, and Washington is actually 2.5-point home favorites. Not very many games Washington has been favored this season. For the Giants, you're always starting Saquon, and he definitely had a ceiling game last week, so he finally looks very, very close to 100% recovered from his ankle injury. Just know it was against the Dolphins, and everyone looks like a generational running back against the Dolphins. This week, he doesn't play an elite run defense or anything, but Washington isn't terrible on defense. So I do think you need to start him, but don't expect last week to happen again this week. As for the Washington side, remember that Geis is done for the season, so Peterson will be handling all of the work on the ground. This is actually a spot where you could use him. He's a home favorite against a pretty bad Giants run defense, and we know they want to give him around 20 touches. I still don't think he's a running back 2, but I would be okay using him in the flex this week. As for Thompson, I don't think you can trust him really in any format because you'd basically just be hoping that the Giants take the lead early and Washington's forced to throw the ball 40 times, but projecting that sort of game script and putting him in the flex just isn't a smart move. Bengals at the Dolphins is next. This game has a 46.5-point total, and the Dolphins are 1-point home favorites, which I want to say is the first time they've been favorites this season, but maybe in one other game they have as well. But just like Washington, not many games where you get the Dolphins as favorites. For the Bengals, Mixon showed his upside last week, and now he gets the best possible matchup. The Dolphins rank 29th in rush defense DVOA and 31st in yards per carry allowed. Plus, the total in this game is relatively high. So if you have Mixon, then I'd say he's a mid-range running back 1 this week, and he's gone over 155 total yards in back-to-back games. It's not like the Dolphins are a defense to fear. For the Dolphins, Patrick Laird did see a dip in his snaps last week. He was up to 82% in week 14 before dropping to 53% last week. Realistically, if you're in the championship, then you didn't get there because of Patrick Laird, so why start now? If you must start him, then he's a very low-end flex option given the great matchup. But again, why are you starting a Dolphins running back in the championship? Next, we have Saints at Titans, and this game has a really high 51.5-point total, and the Saints are up to 3-point road favorites. But that's a pretty close spread. You would not have thought early in the season that we would be in week 16. Drew Brees is healthy, the Saints are rolling, and they're only 3-point favorites against the Titans. But that's how good the Titans have been playing recently. For the Saints, this isn't a good matchup for running backs. The Titans have a pretty solid run defense, but give up a lot of production to wide receivers. But Alvin Kamara doesn't really care about matchups, so you need to start him as a weekly running back 1, and eventually the kid's going to score a touchdown. As for Latavius Murray, you got to keep him on the bench while Kamara is healthy. For the Titans, same as every week, always start Derrick Henry. Next, we have Pittsburgh Steelers at the New York Jets. This one has a really low 39-point total, and the Steelers are 3-point road favorites. For the Steelers, we've got a lot of dudes getting snaps, but Connor is still the clear lead back. He returned last week and saw 8 carries and 5 targets on 59% of the snaps. Jalen Samuels had only 3 touches on 29% of the snaps. Kareth White had 2 touches on 10% of the snaps, and Benny Snell had another 2 touches on 3% of the snaps. With the Steelers taking the final spot in the wild card right now, we should expect Connor to get all of the work he can handle. That doesn't mean they're going to give him the ball every play. It means all the work he can handle. Last week, he couldn't handle 100% of the snaps coming off of his injury. If he's closer to 100% now, we can expect the snaps to go up and the touches to go up as they try to make the playoffs. Not something we thought was going to happen when Big Ben goes down and Juju goes down and Connor goes down, and it's just all these injuries on this team. It's crazy. They're in the playoffs right now. We'll have to see what the reports are throughout the week. Do we expect him to see an increased workload? My guess is yes right now, but again, we will see what people think throughout the week. It's not a good matchup on the road against the Jets, but if he's going to be more involved, I think you got to play him as running back 2. For the Jets, Bell had 23 touches on 86% of snaps in his return last week. His offensive line cannot block though, so that's a problem. And the Steelers do have a really good run defense, so I can't rank him anything higher than a pretty low-end running back 2. But let's be honest, you're probably not in the championship if you drafted Le'Veon Bell, but he was one of our top avoids this season, so I doubt many of you took him. Baltimore at Cleveland is next, and this game has a 49-point over-under, and the Ravens are 10-point road favorites. We did see the Browns destroy them earlier in the season, but I would honestly be shocked if we saw that happen again. For the Ravens, it's the same as every week. You'll love Mark Ingram if he scores, and you'll hate him if he doesn't. The Ravens are projected to score the second most points on the week, and with the Browns' rush defense being very, very bad, he should be locked in as a high variance running back 1 this week. For the Browns, always start Nick Chubb, and while Hunt is flex viable in all formats, he's much better in full PPR leagues since he's not going to get more than 7 or 8 carries, so he is going to be reliant on his receiving work and his work near the end zone. Next, we have the Panthers at the Colts. This game has a 46.5-point over-under, and the Colts are 6.5-point home favorites. On the Panthers side, always start McCaffrey. For the Colts, Mac had a terrible game on Monday night, but the game script was absolutely dreadful. We know that he's historically dominated when the Colts win, and he doesn't do so well when they lose. This week, he's a touchdown home favorite against the bottom 3 run defense, so he should be ranked in that running back 10 to 14 range, kind of a low-end 1, high-end 2, and you really can't start any other Colts running back. Jaguars at Falcons is next. This game has a 45.5-point total, and the Falcons are 7-point road favorites. For the Jaguars, always start Leonard Fournette. For the Falcons, this is an exceptional matchup for Freeman. The Jaguars rank 31st in rush defense DVOA and 29th in yards per carry allowed. They're 1-5 over their last 6 games, and they've allowed 34.8 points per game in those 5 losses. That's absolutely brutal. I expect the Falcons to score a ton of points this week, and that yardage and touchdown upside makes Freeman a mid-range running back 2. Raiders at Chargers is next, and this game has a 47-point over-under, and the Chargers are up to 6.5-point home favorites. For the Raiders, Josh Jacobs returned last week to play 56% of the snaps, but was also given 26 touches. So don't just look at 56% and say he was extremely limited. The dude touched the ball 26 times. It's safe to say that as long as he doesn't suffer a setback this week, we should expect him to see his usual workload in this one. It's not a great spot. He's nearly a touchdown road underdog, and we've seen them shy away from using him when they fall behind. They did lose last week, but they lost late, so it wasn't like they were trailing by 10 points the whole game. The Jaguars scored right at the end. The Chargers have a slightly below average run defense, so this isn't a spot that we're avoiding by any means. I'd view him as a low-end 1 to a high-end 2, similar to Marlon Mack if you want a comparison, but keep in mind that he does have a lower floor than many of the running back 1s. For the Chargers, Gordon and Eckler are both running back 2s this week. Gordon has been seeing slightly more volume than Austin Eckler, but that gap has been closing a bit in recent weeks. I still have Gordon slightly ahead of Eckler because they do prefer using him near the goal line, but it's a very small difference between the two of them, so just view them both as mid-range running back 2s. Lions at Broncos is next. This game has an extremely low 38.5 point total, and the Broncos are 6.5 point home favorites. For the Lions, I went over this situation yesterday in the waiver wire video, but I would just look to avoid the Lions backfield for the rest of the season. As of recording this, there is a chance that Kerryon Johnson returns this week, but there is no way they give him a lot of touches, even if he does return. This backfield is a mess, and they're on the road in a matchup with the Broncos, a really good run defense, in a game with a 38.5 point total, so just stay away. For the Broncos, they still have to deal with the extremely low total, so know that the touchdown upside is limited, but they are home favorites, and the Lions don't have a good run defense, plus Lindsey is getting a pretty decent and reliable workload, so he should be viewed as a low-end running back 2 to a flex play, and I would continue to bench Royce Freeman, really not even needing to own him at this point because it's the championship, and you shouldn't really consider starting him. Next, we have the Cardinals at the Seahawks. This game has a big 50.5 point total, and the Seahawks are 9 point home favorites. For the Cardinals, Kenyon Drake went off last week against a collapsing Browns team. He'll have a more difficult matchup this week, but not a scary one by any means. Seattle ranks 22nd in rush defense DVOA and 15th in yards per carry allowed, so it's a fairly neutral matchup. Drake has been playing 60 to 80% of the snaps, while David Johnson has been playing 20 to 30%. So you can't start David Johnson, and I think Drake is a solid mid-range running back 2, sort of in that Devonta Freeman, Austin Eckler kind of range. This is the Cardinals, so they could always pull a complete 180 on us, but if Drake is going to continue to see 70% of the snaps, then he is a mid to low end running back 2. For Seattle, Carson predictably went off last week in a dream matchup. This week, he gets a similar great matchup against the Cardinals defense that's allowed the 25th most yards per carry and is a 9 point home favorite. So again, he is a top 5 running back play this week. Cowboys at Eagles is next. This game has a 46.5 point total, and the Cowboys are currently 2.5 point road favorites. For the Cowboys, always start Zeke, and despite the performance last week, you still do need to keep Tony Pollard on your bench. For the Eagles, yet again, we'll need to see if Jordan Howard is cleared for contact. If he's out, then fire up Miles Sanders again. If he's active, then I'll need to see if I can figure out how involved they expect him to be, and I'll adjust the rankings on all Eagles players accordingly. As for Boston Scott specifically, you can start him as a flex in a full PPR league if Jordan Howard is out, but it would have to be full PPR, and Howard would need to be out. So if you're in a standard league and Howard's out, I'm probably still not starting Boston Scott. If you're in a full PPR league and Howard is in, I'm probably not starting Boston Scott. He's got to be out. It's got to be full PPR. The Sunday night game is Kansas City at Chicago. The total is currently set at 45 points, and the Chiefs are 4.5 point road favorites. For Kansas City, the only player I'd want in this backfield is Damian Williams. If he can get healthy, then he has upside in this offense. But let's be honest, can he get healthy? We're just going to have to see if he can suit up this week. If he's out, then I still do not want any other running back in this offense. They're not getting the volume to be worth starting, and this isn't a matchup that I'm going out and playing running backs that are barely getting any touches. For the Bears, Montgomery did not have a good game last week, and I wouldn't really feel good about him this week. the Chiefs can put up a ton of points against anyone, and if the Bears fall behind, then Montgomery could see a lot fewer snaps. Because of that, I can only rank him as a flex option. Tariq Cohen is also a flex option, but I would probably feel better about playing Cohen than Montgomery this week. Not usually, but this week I would. I don't see the Bears getting ahead and keeping a lead for the entire game. They could certainly win, but I don't see them getting up 17 and maintaining that, and that's sort of the game script that Montgomery needs in this matchup because it should be higher scoring if the Bears get ahead. It can be a lower scoring game, but that would be if the Bears can't put up points. So this one sets up like a game where they're gonna need to use Cohen to stay with the Chiefs, and if Cohen's going off, then Montgomery isn't. So both of them can be used in the flex, but I think that Cohen has a much clearer path to hitting his ceiling than Montgomery does. The final game of the week is Monday Night Football with the Green Bay Packers at the Minnesota Vikings. This should be a really fun game to watch, and I'm really hoping that Dalvin Cook is healthy enough to play. The current total is 45.5 points, and the Vikings are 4.5 point home favorites, which seems like a lot, but they do play really well at home. For the Packers, this is obviously a difficult matchup for the running backs. The Vikings rank 7th in rush defense DVOA, 8th in yards per carry allowed, plus the Packers are road underdogs. So these are not situations you look to attack for running backs. Aaron Jones is playing a little bit under 60% of the snaps and seeing anywhere from 13 to 17 touches each week. He'll see the occasional spike from that range, but in general, you should expect about 15 touches. Jamal Williams is playing a little over 40% of the snaps, and he's seeing anywhere from 7 to 13 touches. That volume expectation combined with the matchup makes Jones a risky mid-range running back too, and takes Jamal Williams out of flex territory this week, unless you're in a 16-team league. For the Vikings, it all depends on the health of Dalvin Cook. Current reports seem to indicate that he will play, but that could change as the week progresses. Assuming that he's in, then I do think you have to play him as a home favorite against a below average run defense in a very important game for playoff seeding, so they're not just going to rest him. If he's out there, you should assume he's getting his normal workload. If he's out, then it depends on the status of Madison, and you can just look at the rankings when that news gets released, since again, they're free, and I think I'm going to project Dalvin Cook in, and then when we hear otherwise, I'll adjust accordingly. So if you look at the rankings, this is assuming that Dalvin Cook plays, so keep that in mind when looking at them. So that is everything you should need answered at the running back position for championship weekend. If your question wasn't answered, then just look at my rankings at our website, thefantasyfootballadvice.com. But that's the end of this one. I hope you all did enjoy. If you did, how about hitting that like button? And if you're new here, how about subscribing to the channel? But thanks for watching.